Hi, YouTube, and we're about to get started here. We're going to be talking about Virginia spring football. We're having a special guest today to break down what we've been seeing with the open portions available to the media, who has stood out, what has the defense looked like, what has the offensive line looked like, has the energy changed, what is different with Tony Elliott and his staff this spring. But first, could you please subscribe to YouTube and click on that bell? This allows you to get notified whenever there's a new video. So if you could just do that right now, again, subscribe to this channel and click on the bell. This channel will not only have full-length video of our podcast episodes, but it will also have video interviews and, of course, our sights and sounds from Virginia practice. So it's Tuesday morning, and let's get started. Hi, I'm Jackie Ferrantulli, and welcome to a new episode of the Good Old Podcast. I hope everyone is doing well this week. And we're halfway through spring football, and things are moving forward. It seems like the coaching staff is somewhat happy on where things are. Obviously, if you're a coach in college football, you're never entirely happy. So this week, we have a guest to help us break down everything that's been going around with Virginia football. And I have the pleasure of welcoming in Daily Progress's Greg Madia. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Jackie. It's been busy for this new football staff. A lot to do in their first spring leading the Wahoos.
Yeah, I think the first thing for a new coaching staff is always trying to get that locker room to buy in. That is the first big step. And I don't know about you, but I feel like this is the first thing that you can tell that a lot of these players did in fact buy in to what they brought in.
Yeah, I think it helps that Tony Elliott, of course, has the background in the ACC, right? And then all the success at Clemson, then the college football playoff appearances, the national championships. I think there's immediate credibility there for Elliott because the players have played in the league and they know what Clemson has done and they know what he's all about from that point of view. And then second, when you start to hear the stories about his past and why he wants to be at UVA and the combination and the want to for a program that's really good football wise, but also has the high academic standards. I think, Jackie, it resonates with players who chose to go to UVA for some of those reasons. And then you look at the staff he's assembled, and it's really a nice combination and mix of guys who have been at different various stops. So the staff has a unique blend and perspective of what it takes to be successful. I think, you look at a guy like Des Kitchings, longtime, ACC assistant at NC State, had a year in the NFL with the Atlanta Falcons. You have that background, which is extensive, deep experience at a very, very high level. Then you have Taylor Lamb, a young quarterback coach who recently played the game, right? He was a star at App State in the Sun Belt. And to me, you just have a nice mix. You have guys with, military academy stops with defensive coordinator John Rodzinski and his secondary coach too, Jerome Cox. So for me, I think you look at it and you just see a lot of different backgrounds coming together for the first time, and they align. A lot of their thoughts align though with what Tony Elliott wants to bring to UVA and that model program that you've heard so much about through the first, since December, since he got the job, really. So to me, I think that's why maybe the players have bought in, at least the ones we've talked to through the first part of spring ball.
And if you're on our YouTube channel right now, the video that you're seeing right now is for the practice that was open on Saturday. That was only the second practice that was open to the media, and we finally got to see them in pads. And what I liked about this practice, Greg, was the first time that we got to see them do individual drills, not sort of like it was broken down in position, but we really got to see what this staff has been talking about to us in these interviews, is that they're working on fundamentals. We saw the defense. What was the main problem last year? Well, there were several, but the first one was missed tackles and tackling. And what they were doing on Saturday, they were doing tackling drills. And then more on the offense, they were doing more about ball control. But I really like seeing the defense and what they were doing. And you saw what they've been talking about. You saw that more physicality, and you saw the energy that Tony Elliott has been saying about this defense and the speed of the practice. Now, I was gassed just seeing them run from one drill to the other. What was something that you took from those minutes that we're able to see?
Yeah, I think the pace of practice, first of all, is really important. You get the sense that Tony Elliott doesn't want to waste his players' time, and that there's a purpose to practicing that fast, right? It serves as conditioning in addition to the ability to get things done in a timely fashion. So you're kind of knocking out two birds with one stone, and throughout the course of a football season, right, as you get deeper into late October, November. You want to be able to have your legs under you. And then this type of practice routine, this type of practice atmosphere, I think creates that where you're constantly on the go and there is a high level of expectation to be on from one thing to the next. And I think the tackling too, John Rodzinski, when he first spoke to us, the media, that back in February, he had kind of vowed that it was going to be this spring was going to be about tackling. It was going to be about the fundamentals. And you're seeing the coaches break it down in the tackling circuit. And I think that's very, very important. I think you'll start to see them improve as it goes along. Virginia's defensive backs, the one we spoke to on Monday, and Antonio Clary, the safety, he had said, he thinks they're getting better fundamentally, and a couple other defensive backs have noticed that too. I think Anthony Johnson has said the same thing after the first day of practice, that even on day one, there was huge emphasis on fundamentals. And I think that's going to be something to watch, because how do you get better at tackling? You practice it, right? And I know there's limitations as things kind of go in college football now as to how much you can hit and how much tackling can be done during a practice, especially as you get closer to the regular season. But to take advantage of the time you do have is important. I think that's where UVA is starting before, they're kind of stressing that before all the scheme stuff. And while the scheme is important, you better be able to run, you better be able to hit, because that's very important as well.
Yeah, actually, we had Anthony Johnson on our podcast last week, and he was pretty adamant in how much he liked how the practices have been going. And he told us a story, actually, that if you get a turnover in practice, you get a visor. So he's trying to hunt for a visor right now. We haven't asked him how he's doing now, but during the podcast, he has yet to get himself a visor. But he's also wearing a green jersey on Saturday, so he's a little bit limited in practice. And that actually, it's my next thing is when we were out there were several players with green jerseys. We knew they were going to be banged up a little bit this spring. We knew numbers was going to be an issue. Anyone would have noticed that just from the activity around the transfer portal.
Right.
But it is kind of hindering the spring practice a bit on the O-line. Sometimes they only had 8 healthy offensive linemen. That's a tall order for you to install on offense. And then on defense, Coach Cox was talking about it today. Sometimes they're only running on 2 deep in the safety position. So when you're looking at UVA right now, I know we're going to talk a little bit about more detail who's running the first team, who's running the second team. It looks like this spring, it really isn't about cementing that depth chart. It really is about starting this team out in a fresh start. And I don't want to say kind of brush aside everything from the old staff. I'm saying it's about building what they did in the old staff and kind of trying to find a balance between what the old staff did and what this staff is doing, and trying to figure out a way to do similarities, but in a different manner, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think first of all, Tony Elliott's trying to establish his culture, his routines. And then as far as the systems and the scheme goes, they're trying to figure out probably what players fit best where within the offense, within the defense. Like I look at that defensive line, and they've got a good number of defensive linemen playing. I'm sure they're trying to figure out who may fit best as an edge rusher. They have a lot of those kind of in between type bodies, type athletes that could maybe fit as a 3-4 defensive end, or maybe as an edge rusher. So I think you're kind of assessing a lot of that if you're UVA right now, just trying to get a feel for your personnel. And Tony Elliott talked about it a little bit on Saturday after the practice, that even on offense, that they're trying a wide spectrum, wide scoping. And something I wrote about for Sunday's paper at the Daily Progress is that, you're trying to figure out exactly what you'll be good at. So you may run and you may install so many different plays and concepts and have one thing build off of the next. But at the same time, come fall camp or come that first game week of the season, you'll start paring it down and you'll start really concentrating on what you're good at. But right now, him and his staff, both offensively and defensively, are trying to figure out exactly what their personnel fits within things they want to do or things they think they can do. I thought it was really interesting when Tony was talking about some of the wide receivers, and that he started to get a little bit excited when he mentioned, the possibility of Lavelle Davis and Malachi Fields playing at the same time, and then changing up the speed with what they can do using Dontavian Wicks and Keaton Thompson. So I think there's a lot of different possibilities, and this spring is about as much as they are installing their systems and schemes and trying to set their culture, they're trying to figure out what their players are good at, because come fall, they probably want to have a little bit more concise plan about how to prepare for the season and hone in on those strengths.
Yeah, actually, I think one of the best quotes that we've had, or at least the best insight, is when we got Taylor Lamb on, and he said, "We're just going to have to let Brennan be Brennan." I think that was, you always have a problem with a new staff, not always, but there's always an issue that possibly could happen when you have a new staff come to town, where you're trying to do something with what your system works with players that weren't, you didn't recruit these players, so you're trying to do something that just doesn't fit.
Yeah.
But this staff is coming in saying, we have these pieces. And especially when you consider the piece that you have is a guy called Brennan Armstrong, you want to do what he's strong at. And what I liked is hearing that he's been in meetings and he's saying, if you like this particular play, we're going to do this play. And I think that's something that, as this spring goes and as the off season goes, because anytime you talk to a quarterback's coach or a head coach, the biggest part of the quarterback's development is being spring and fall camp. So this is the opportunity where, they're going to build on the chemistry. They're going to really go into the offensive playbook. It's going to be interesting to see how this team evolves offensively, because I know a lot of UVA fans, when I keep quoting Tony Elliott saying that the defense won the day, some fans go, well, should I be worried then about the offense? But at the same time, you can understand the offense is trying to get new pieces in, but also the O-line is a huge factor on why they can't really work on timing. And we touched upon this earlier. They only have 8 healthy linemen on some occasions. Sometimes they're able to weasel away with 10, but that's too little linemen when you're working at this pace, Greg. And also, when you're trying to instill an offense, an up-tempo practice that Tony Elliott has been holding, it's going to have a struggle to really do walkthroughs and all that. But so before we carry on, so during Saturday's practice, we found out a couple of first-team options there. It was Logan Taylor, Noah Josie, Justice Johnson, Derek Devine, and Jonathan Leach. Those were some of the players that was in that first team. Logan Taylor was limited, so he didn't do the second walkthrough with the 11s. What was your initial impression when you looked at the offensive line? Just for the, we only see about 30 minutes of practice, and we didn't see much of them going through the walkthroughs. But what was your initial impression of that group?
Yeah, I think it's a group, and it's interesting, right? Because some of those guys had to work with the second team too, just because they needed they needed bodies with that second group. And I think that's probably this is one thing that stands out to me. That's probably a good thing for some of those guys who don't have all the experience, because I think, first of all, you look at a couple of those players like Derek Devine. He's playing multiple positions, taking primarily snaps at guard, but also getting reps at tackle. That's probably a good thing in the long run, right? When some of these grad transfers eventually get in, Mac Hollensteiner from Georgetown, and John Paul Flores from Dartmouth. I think to me that's good. You want to have guys that are able to be versatile, and it sounds like from what Devine was saying that he understands that, and while primarily he's working at guard, he's an older player who wants to get on the field. So I think the more you can expose them to different things, that's a positive. Of course, it's tough to get through a practice and get through an entire 15 sessions to make it to the spring game with that few offensive linemen on the roster. But I think it also provides a lot of opportunities for players you could potentially be relying on come fall. So I think it's kind of a double-edged sword. From one point of view, it's tough to practice, but from the other point of view, those players are getting a lot of good reps. And for Garrett Touche, who has to rebuild this offensive line kind of on the fly, I think that's positive, and he probably likes working, repetitively with a lot of the same offensive linemen over and over again, because he really gets to see, what they can do, what they can't do. And that's a step in the right direction, and a part of developing and figuring out what this new look starting five is going to be. You think the grad transfers are going to factor into it, but you also need some players within the program to step up, and there are opportunities there. I think for Justice Johnson at center, there's one. Ty Furnish is another player who's been in the mix at a couple of different spots. It looked like Saturday, center and guard, an interior player. I think that's certainly a positive for them, is that they're getting opportunities, they're getting snaps, and they have an opportunity to win a job. I think Tujay had a great line when he said, it'd be embarrassing if somebody walked in fall camp after you've had 15 practices and take your job. So to me, I think there's good and bad with it, but good for the personnel involved that they have the chance.
Yeah, from our interview with Coach TJ, although again they're working in different positions,
Yeah.
Ty Furnish and Justice Johnson have been working at center. Derek Devine and sophomore Noah Josie are your guards. Jonathan Leach and Charlie Patterson are working at your tackles.
Leach seems to be a guy who's having a good camp too.
Yes, and he looks. I don't want to say he looks bigger, because he was always a big guy, but he looks like he's toned more.
Yeah.
And he was hurt a little bit last season as well. So it's good to see him out there, and he seemed more engaged just from seeing him in the last couple of practices. We've heard a lot about Noah Josie, but we've been hearing a lot about Noah Josie since he stepped foot on grounds last summer. So it seems like this could be a good breakout season for him. He's one of the young guys that could step up. And then obviously Derek Devine. I think a lot of people, because he's a fifth year, he's one of the older guys. He got hurt last year, filled in for Glazer a bit during the spring, and it seemed like he was on par to have a breakout season last year, and he got hurt. So he's the forgotten man on this offensive line. We talk about, he doesn't have experience. But look, you have a guy who's experienced what it takes to be an offensive lineman. He's learned from the guys ahead of him. And he's been in 2J's, locker room. He's been in this group for 5 years. So if you had to look at one guy that could kind of really cement himself a leader of the group, it's going to be Derek Devine. And it seemed like he's really doing that. You've seen him to be pretty vocal at practice.
He stayed, right, for all the transfers that I wrote about, you talked about, I'm sure, through in the days after Bronco Mendenhall left. He's a guy who stayed. And I think that there's a lot of you gain a lot of credibility with your teammates there for being the one guy in the room who's been around, who knows what the O-line coach Garrett Tujay expects, who knows what it's like to hear Brennan Armstrong command a huddle a little bit, or at least shout out plays. So to me, I think you have instant credibility there if you're Devine, simply because you stuck around and you want to see where the offensive line can grow and how you could potentially fit in it. So I think that that's a really good point.
And kind of moving from, I think this is a good way to segue to running backs, because when you have a good O-line, you can cement yourself a good running game. Unfortunately, we haven't seen much of the run game in all the times that we've been out there. But just looking at the depth chart and hearing what Tony Elliott said in his post-practice interview on Saturday, it's unfortunate news that Ronnie Walker got hurt, and that he says he's not going to be back in spring. But he also said they don't know how long he's out, and then the word extended amount of time out seems like it could be a while till he comes back. We don't know if he's going to be available for fall camp or the season. But then 24 hours later, they're out there offering a transfer portal running back, a grad transfer out of Buffalo, Dylan McDuffie. So you can assume that they're going to be hunting for the running back because they're going to need bodies in there. When you look at that group, Greg, I really am interested in Mike Hollins. I think he's a guy that everyone wants to see just kind of develop into that main running back. I think everyone knew that during the old system, he needed to work on sometimes his blocking and just being in the right position at the right time. But it seems like he's slowly, adjusting to this new staff. And it seems like Elliott, this last practice, might have had that light bulb moment from what we can tell.
Yeah, and I think it sounded like Elliott it was really happy with them because he hadn't quite seen maybe the level of energy or commitment needed on an every snap basis. Maybe he's seen flashes. I don't want to speak for Tony Elliott in that regard, but maybe it sounded like that he's maybe seen some flashes through the first 2 weeks of practice, and then all of a sudden on Saturday something really worked for Hollins. Maybe it's more touches after Walker's injury, and I think as far as the position group goes, right? Running back's a spot where you'll hear all college football coaches say it is you can never have enough depth at running back because of the nature of the position and how it gets banged up. But I know UVA hasn't maybe been committed to the run in the past, like it probably will be this year with both Tony Elliott and Des Kitchings, the offensive coordinator, saying that they're going to be balanced, meaning that they're going to have to be able to run the football when they need to and throw it whenever they need to. But there's going to be a run game in there, and a big part of the offense will be, featured with the running game. So I think at that spot, the fact that they're looking at a grad transfer doesn't surprise me because that's a position just based on track record and how many hits a running back takes throughout the course of a year. You're going to need probably three, probably four to get through a season. So I think the more depth you can have at running back, that the better off you're suited if you're UVA. You have all the depth in the world at receiver. You probably need it more at running back.
Yeah, I think the transfer portal is going to be very busy for Virginia once April 24th comes along. I think as soon as that spring game happens, I mean, they're going to offer kids from here on out, but I think once April 23rd happens, I think we're going to see a lot more movement. I wouldn't be shocked if they offer more running backs, more tight ends,
right,
and even a DB here and there, and possibly even O linemen. They're still going after Tyler Steen, the Vandy offensive line, and from everything we've been hearing, UVA is right there with Alabama. So it's going to be interesting to see. His brother Blake Steen committed to UVA and signed in February. So maybe that sibling connection might help Virginia there. But after this quick word from our sponsors, we'll be right back and we'll talk about some of the guys who have stood out during spring practice, and we'll get some insight into the baseball team as well. So stick around. Welcome back. And here joining me is Daily Progress's Greg Madia. So Greg, we've been talking about spring football and some of the things that we've been watching, like the offensive linemen, the defense and their physicality. But one thing we're also seeing is some new faces stepping up, guys that we could see raising their stock this spring, because again, it's a fresh start, new staff in town. There's no preconception. There's no seniority here. Everyone is starting fresh. And I wanted to hear your thoughts and who do you think could really gain this week? We've already seen a couple of things. Obviously, we're halfway through spring ball, but who do you want to see more of? And who do you think has risen their stock already as prepare for the April 23rd spring game?
Yeah, I think first on defense, you got to look at the cornerback, William Simpkins. He's been a guy that both Tony Elliott and Jerome Cox have spoken pretty highly about, and there's work to do there in terms of polishing raw skill. But it seems like he's starting to understand, a sophomore, starting to figure it out a little bit. The Gaithersburg, Maryland native. So I think for Simpkins, that's positive. And for UVA secondary, that's positive because you're always looking for players in the secondary who can cover. And then I think on offense, we talked about Leach already. He's kind of been one guy that stuck out, and you're starting to think that maybe could be a starting tackle for Virginia. But it also on offense, I'll mention Malachi Fields, who is apparently pushing Lavelle Davis for playing time, and the Monticello product, local kid. Malachi Fields, maybe he fits into this offense a little bit differently. That first group of receivers, at least Saturday, was Fields, Thompson, and Wicks. And it was a little surprising to see Fields with that group instead of Davis. So that to me is an interesting storyline, probably a great position battle to keep an eye on, not only through the rest of the spring, but probably into the August training camp too. That Malachi Fields, Lavelle Davis, the battle, I think you could say. And it'll be interesting to see how Billy Kemp fits in too once he gets back at the receiver position, maybe more of a slot and paired there with Thompson. But to me, I think that's one position battle to really keep an eye on, Fields versus Davis.
Man, every time I hear all those wide receivers in that one room, you're just like, if I was an opposing defense, I'm like, who do we even practice for? Like, it's so many different options, and you have Brennan Armstrong under center, which means like all the stuff we are talking about the O line is so crucial for Virginia as we look next season.
You
And
you would
just
think
for
that would open up the running game a little bit, right? I mean,
well,
yeah,
we
I know,
thought that last year too, didn't we?
but Virginia didn't run the football.
Exactly.
I think now you have a coach that's a little more committed, an offensive coordinator that's a little more committed to being balanced. So maybe there's ways to leverage all those standout wide receivers and returning fifth year experienced quarterback, one of the best quarterbacks coming back in the country, to aid your running game.
Yeah, really, when you think about it, it's such a shame that Devin Darrington wasn't given another year by the NCAA. And when you think of all this stuff now, you're listing all this stuff, and you're like, man, if they had Devin Darrington or if Wayne Talapapa decided to stay here for one more year, you're like, you could see that running back room. Although there's a lot of talent in there, having those veterans in there would have saved them a trip to the transfer portal.
Yes.
But just kind of bouncing off you, I think one guy I was impressed with on Saturday was Chico Bennett. We talk about that linebacker room, and obviously Nick Jackson is just, I think I'm going to quote Tony Elliott. Nick Jackson is just, well, Nick Jackson. So he's still doing well, and he's a guy who's really taken ownership of that room. He has the last year as well. But I'm really interested to see how Chico Bennett fits in. He had that blocked field goal. He looks really healthy, which is great for UVA. He came in for Georgia Tech and got hurt and couldn't factor last year. And I think you touched on this because some of those guys in the linebacker room were originally recruited as edge rushers, and then because they switched their system, got changed. Desean Perry is one guy that I'm thinking of, and he struggled when he changed positions. I think he's going to be one that would benefit from moving onto the outside. And that's a guy who has a lot of talent. He played South Florida ball coming from Gulliver Prep. So I'm curious to see if he's one that moves out to the edge. And like Tony Elliott says, you can't have enough edge rushers on your team. So that's a guy that I'm curious to see too, how he develops. And then on that, we focus so much on the O-line, and rightfully so because of the offense you have. I'm curious about the D-line because last year, one of the things that I wanted to see more of, because I came on the beat for the first time last year, and the only thing I heard was Bronco Mendenhall's defense causes havoc, and I didn't see that havoc. And when you look at Jameer Carter, he looks very fit. When you look out for him, you can see his dad posts a lot of Twitters, have been working out, and he looks the part, and he doesn't look as as a big guy. You expect him to be a little more gassed when he moves from drills to drills, but he didn't seem to be as gassed. So I'm looking at him. I'm also looking at Ben Smiley. So I'm looking at those guys to kind of raise their stock a little bit, especially, once, because Sue was out for a little bit for sickness. So with him out, you see those guys, and those guys are trying to cement their role on the D line. And then at tight end, we touched about that they're going to go to the transfer portal to probably, they wanted to add Steve Stylianos, but he then obviously went to Iowa. So I'm imagining that they're going to go back into the transfer portal and offer more tight ends. I'm looking at Josh Rawlings.
He's big.
He's big. You're missing on Jelani Woods here. You need to get some height there, and he's a big guy. And Grant Mish, bless him. Every time you look at film from last year and some of those big Brennan Armstrong runs, who was the guy blocking for him? It was usually Grant Mish. So yes, I think he's going to be a good guy on the field, but I think Josh Rawlings, and good thing he decided to come back from the transfer portal. He was a guy that Tony Elliott was able to convince to back. I think he's the one, and you're actually going to see video of him right now. Great timing, the tight ends are showing here. He's the one that I think could really step out, especially if they are not successful in that transfer portal. So those are the big things that I'm looking at. I'm looking at tight end and D-line, and obviously linebacker. I guess I'm more focused on the defense after last year, apart from the tight end room. But, we've talked a lot about football. And obviously everything's talking about football. There's new energy around the program with Tony Elliott. But let's talk about the energy at the dish right now. My goodness, I haven't been able to get to the dish yet because of all the stuff's going on about football. But those bats are pretty on fire there.
Yeah, Jackie, it's unbelievable. I mean, they're 25-3. And then yesterday they had the Big Ten run inning against Georgia Tech to help them take that series against the Yellow Jackets. And it's really just a dangerous lineup all the way through 1 through 9. There's nobody in that lineup that can't hit or that's an easy out. You can't pitch around anybody. Not to mention you have Jake Geloff in the middle of everything in that cleanup spot, and he's just putting the ball out of the ballpark on a regular basis, driving in runs. He leads the country in home runs with 14, leads the country in RBIs with 51, leads the country in slugging percentage. And then he's also 8th nationally in on-base percentage and batting average. So it tells you a little bit about the season he's having. He's probably a contender at this point for National Player of the Year, and probably has a pretty good shot at it if he keeps this pace up. So he's been unbelievable. He has protection in the lineup with Alex Tappan hitting behind him. And then Kyle Teal, of course, the catcher, the backstop. He's been really, really good hitting, especially with the bases loaded, too. He's got 3 grand slams already. So this team is really deep, has a really deep lineup. They're getting pretty good starts, pretty good quality pitching at an Nate Savino and Brian Gursky. Jake Berry was added to the pitching staff. And then their bullpen. Something I'm writing about this week has been pretty deep, and that wasn't something they expected going into the year. They thought they had a shot, but with so many new arms, Jay Woolfolk, the quarterback, backup quarterback included in that mix, they've been really good out of the bullpen too.
I was actually gonna say Jay Wolfuck, that guy. I don't know how he does it, but he's been. We've seen him in the first practice of spring. He was there early morning, and that evening, it was a Tuesday. That evening, UVA baseball had a home game, so he comes in. He doesn't really practice. He was just following the drills with Brennan Armstrong and Davis Lane and Raymond. He was there listening. Maybe throw here and there, but not actively participating. But the thing is, he was there. He's listening to what Coach Lamb is saying, trying to soak it in. He goes to meetings whenever he can, or he goes to the coaches and asks them. And then he goes out and has a great inning or two for UVA baseball. And I think it's wonderful when Elliott, he was asked about Jay in his post practice on Saturday. And you can obviously see the joy in Tony Elliott. There's covering recruiting, you always hear like, oh, sure, you can have a 2-sport athlete, but it's really hard to do that. And also it's sometimes at some point, these athletes either decide it's not for me, or some college coaches say like, we can't do this. And they don't even offer the option, but Elliott obviously seems to enjoy, he's a baseball guy too. And what have you seen from Jay Wolfuck when he does go out there?
It's been unbelievable to watch, and you can't do it unless you have the support of your coaches. So you're totally right there, Jackie, Tony Elliott, and Brian O'Connor, each supportive of Jay doing both sports. So it's really, really impressive, and he's been so good. I mean, he's hit 95, 96 miles an hour on a radar gun with the fastball. He's striking people out. He was really good against Georgia Tech, probably the toughest competition he's faced this season. This past Friday night, they lost the game 6-4, but he had 3 scoreless innings and kept giving the offense a chance to go ahead and try to win the game with his shutdown innings in relief. He struck out Kevin Parada, the Georgia Tech catcher, who is probably going to be drafted within the first 5-10 picks of this summer's MLB draft. So it kind of tells you where Jay's at baseball wise. He's been really, really good out of the bullpen. They can trust him. He's not their closer, but he's a late inning guy. Their closer is Will Gertis, but they go to him often, and he's delivered.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we saw a glimpse of what Jay can do when he came in for Brennan Armstrong against that game in
Yeah.
Notre Dame, against BYU, especially when here he comes on the road against BYU and didn't show those freshman tendencies. So obviously he's okay in the bigger spotlight. So with all of his baseball, tradition and experience, it does certainly help. And what I want to just ask you one more thing about baseball. It seems like the atmosphere has certainly taken a turn on at the Dish. Coach Brian O'Connor has made it his job. Second job is to get people in the stands. They're doing Taco Tuesdays. I think it's free kids every Sunday now.
Yeah,
So
free kids all the time.
free
Anybody
kids,
18 and under gets in the ballpark for free. It's a great thing for the people, people with kids, and they can bring them. and it's really created a lively atmosphere. I mean, yesterday, Sunday was just unbelievable. The crowd, they were into the game. They had 5,000 plus. I think it was 5,200 something, setting a new record.
Yeah,
Home attendance.
5,286 fan, which was a new park attendance record.
Yeah, just unbelievable. And I think it's something that, for all the success Virginia has had, it's something that should be there for them baseball wise. 5 trips to Omaha, national championship. They went to Omaha last year. So I think it's only a good thing for UVA.
Yeah, it seems like I think it's Coach Oaks Ticks is the Twitter handle now for it. So that's what I'm looking over here. So if you're interested in going to the baseball game, again, it's at Coach Oaks Ticks. So then you can follow him on Twitter and also just get the details on. They do a lot of specialties things during the games, and they really want fans in the stands. I think all UVA sports are really trying to push that. We've heard it from Virginia football. We heard it from the new Virginia women's basketball coach. She's trying to put an effort in the community. We've heard it from Tony Bennett. So I think this is going to be something that we hear a lot from across UVA sports. Well, Greg, thank you so much for being on our podcast today. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jackie. Appreciate it, and was happy to do it.
Remember, we'll have a brand new episode of the Good Old Podcast on Tuesday. It'll be available on anywhere that you listen to your podcast. We are already on Apple and on Spotify. You can also see the video version of the podcast on our YouTube channel, so make sure you subscribe to the channel and also hit the bell so you are notified when a new episode has been loaded up. And make sure you also review and rate our podcast on Apple.
For Greg Madia, I'm Jackie Franchule. Hope you all have a good rest of your week.